My name is Diane Yamashiro Omi. I'm a descendant of a family that was incarcerated in Crystal City. I'm very pleased to be with you today and through the pilgrimage. This is my second pilgrimage, and to be honest, every moment we spend together is really precious, and we will carry memories of our conversation and the people we meet, going forward for a long time until the next pilgrimage. So I am honored today to talk about the work that we have been doing on a museum in Crystal City, Texas. And in some ways, I'm hoping to convey the importance that individuals play in making this work happen. So without kind of like this commitment and this passion for telling this story, none of this could have ever come to be. So I think that's very important. And then also the role that community institutions like Densho play in being able to preserve our stories and to kind of continue the legacy of our family members and all that they went through during that time period. So it is my honor to introduce Diana Palacios, who's a longtime resident of Crystal City and who is the founder of the My Story Museum, which opened in 2024. It is the first museum for Crystal City. So it's timely, because I think that members of Crystal City have always felt that they have played an important role and have served the state of Texas as well as their local community. But so many great people have come from that community, and it was important to honor them. So Diana was a leader of the historic 1969 Crystal City High School walkout, which sparked the transformation of the city's schools and government. She's been a dedicated public servant and has served as city manager, also on the school board. And she is now a small business owner in her retirement and is very dedicated to her church and the Christian faith. And then to my left is Victor Una, who probably doesn't need an introduction, but Victor and I have worked very closely for the past few years. And we've actually met at the first Crystal City reunion in Monterey. I don't know if you know that, but that was like in 1993. We were, of course, little children then. But we have fond memories of having that conversation with Victor at that reunion. But he is the grandson of George Kumemaro Uno, who was arrested in 1942 under the Alien Enemies Act, as most of our relatives were as well. And he was confined in numerous DOJ camps. As we know, our fathers in particular got moved from multiple DOJ prisons just to confuse them as to where they were, I'm sure, and finally reunited with his family, his very large family in Crystal City, Texas. And then I have Courtney Y. Is that how you pronounce? Oh, I'm sorry. So Courtney is a staff member of Densho. She is the Education and Public Programs Manager, and she began her career as a middle school English language arts teacher in the Rio Grande Valley, so she's local, and has also taught ESL in San Antonio. And she has worked for Teach for America, the City of San Antonio Office of Equity, City Year San Antonio, and Relay Graduate School is part of the Graduate School of Education. And before joining Densho, she was a professional learning facilitator with Learning for Justice, a project of the Southern Poverty Law Center, and served as consulting instructor and Southern Regional Manager for the Asian American Education Fund. Wow. Amazing for a young person. So please welcome our speakers. I am not a good public speaker, so I was hoping that we could make this as informal as possible, but the crowd seems kind of large to be informal. But at any rate, I just want you to know that we want to hear from you as well. So, speak up if you have any questions or just want to say wow or whatever. You're welcome to. Okay, so we're going to start with My Story Museum, kind of the story of this project that we've been working on. Many people don't know about the history of Crystal City. So it is especially meaningful that there is a place that tells that history, a story that not everybody knows about. So it is really important for us to be able to tell that story.
Great honor for us to be here today to celebrate this grand opening of the My Story Museum. Let's hear a wonderful round of applause for this wonderful historic event.
Children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, and all of us need to be able to teach them what we have been through and what has been accomplished. I invite you all right now to see what the museum has to offer.
People in this community always wanted a museum. But my idea is to have a museum, and these are the 3 stories that I want to tell.
We have the Veterans Honor Roll, which is Diana Palacios' commemoration to her father, who was a World War II vet. We also have the history of the La Raza Unida Party, which started here in Crystal City as a result of the 69 high school walkout. And then we have the Crystal City internment camp, which is kind of the third part of this 3-part museum.
When I purchased the building, I was thinking of my business, but I knew this was too big. I called Uri, and he said, you know what? I'm going to tell Mr. Uno about you. We two need to talk. We agreed to meet. There was talk about what the Pilgrimage Committee was trying to do. And at that meeting, I told them about the building and that it was available. And from then on, we just kept talking about it and figuring out what we were going to do.
Well, Crystal City and Zavala County is rich in history. The work in the field, Cesar Chavez was here. The Raza Unida, of course, Popeye. That's part of our history. We have a committee that is helping with the veterans, gathering the photos and putting out the notices and all that. Mr. Victor Uno and his group with the exhibit for the internment camp. They are also magnificent.
A group of us started talking about how it would be nice to have a place to kind of showcase or show the history of the Crystal City internment camp.
The significant part of the story is that Crystal City was the last concentration camp that alone has some national significance.
When I found out that the school where I went to was actually for prisoners, they never told it. They kept it quiet. I guess they were ashamed or something.
Looking at some of these photos, they're in all of these photos. My sisters and brothers, my parents. It's, even to this day, it's hard to explain how they made it through.
My father came to Crystal City. He was interned when he was 16 years old, and his story is similar to others, a story that not everybody knows about.
The stories are going to be the real key to this, so we're extremely happy and pleased that we're part of this.
Yeah, that partnership with the Crystal City residents, the elected officials, Diana Palacios has just been so instrumental in us being able to do this.
They all said, yes, we love to have you and we'll help you in any way we can. So,
and having this relationship is going to really help us secure a future for us here.
It's all about people. It's the people who, changed life in America for their children, and really, this is a place where they can be honored.
It's a real intrinsic part of this community's history, and to have it here, I think it's going to be a big draw.
We're very, very lucky that we had this opportunity, and here it is. We're having a grand opening.
This is the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life. Seriously. What I've known all my life. Well, their families anyway, They told me about this place. They knew about this place,
Kind of amazing to see, because this piece right here, this is my great-grandpa. Yeah, so it's cool to see a lot of like my family's stuff here, and then how they're honoring a lot of the veterans from here, from my little hometown, Crystal City.
I think it's wonderful to express all the history that's going on here. It's really proud to say that I'm from here too.
Thank you. Good afternoon. When I first heard her say, would you please, I thought she was going to say, would you please stand up because I'm so short. But honestly, I think the people that are here from Crystal City can tell you that they've never seen me cry, so I'm not going to. But even if I do, you won't know it because I have no tears. I used up all of mine about 10 years ago, so. But this, Crystal City has always had a rich history, and a lot of people, including myself, have always talked about having a museum there. And I cannot take credit, and one of the things that I'm embarrassed about is when I say my idea was, because it never was my idea. It was actually the Lord that gave me an assignment of something to do, as if I didn't already have enough to do. But I felt this assignment very heavily in my heart. And I was, one morning I stayed in bed and, excuse me, I was praying, and the Lord gave me the name for the museum. And other people had different ideas, but I knew I couldn't do anything except what I felt I had to do. And the reason it's called My Story Museum is because I felt like this group has a story. This group has a story. Every individual has a story. When you put it all together, it becomes our story, but each individual has a story. So whenever I talk to kids in schools or colleges, I tell them, be careful how you live your life, because every day that you're alive, you're making history. It may not be a history that the whole world will hear about, but your family will remember. So it's very important to be aware of that. So that's how I got the name. Then I felt for a couple of songs which we used during the opening ceremonies. But, you know, the word says that the Lord uses the simple to confound the wise. And that's really what he did with me. And I am amazed at how people hear about the museum and how many people come from all over. And even people in Crystal City didn't really know much about the internment camp because it was something we didn't talk about. But I feel that, well, first of all, I need to thank people that made it happen, because it's way above my intelligence or abilities. First of all, I thank the Lord because I see his hand in every part of this, in the people he brought together. And people like Diane, like Victor, Doshi, Kaz, Rob, I know I'm missing somebody. Karen, but they came and they have come and they put up the first exhibit for the internment camp, and now they've been here putting up this second exhibit, and they've put in so much work. And the way people have come together, I never could have done it. I was foolish enough to say in the beginning, I told them, that's okay, you don't need to do that. It's something that I have to do, and whether you were here or not, I would have done it anyway, which is total stupidity on my part. I never could have done this on my own. And I'm so grateful to everyone that has helped everyone that has supported it, and I hope it lives on way beyond me. For our children, our grandchildren, and I already have great-grandchildren, so thank you very much for supporting the museum, and I hope you get to come and see it.
So I will advertise her museum because now they're selling T-shirts. So you all will be able to make a purchase on Saturday.
Going.
Yeah, that's to support the museum. Okay, and now we have Victor's story. So I've asked each panelist to talk about the origin story to their project. And for Victor, it's very personal. And we have all benefited from Victor's relationship with Hector Estrada, whose extensive photo collection was what we first used for the opening. And I can't get it up.
Oh, it's there.
It's there. Okay. Okay. Here you go.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor.
My presentation actually isn't anything about me. It's about people, and here it says unsung hero, Hector Estrada. And it's about people who find a purpose and a calling in a way that is really just quite amazing. But before I do that, I want to honor Diana, because we just opened the museum not even a year ago. And it was maybe 6 or 7 months before that we had actually visited with an idea. And Diana here secured funding from the Takahashi Foundation to explore the possibility of doing a museum, just a possibility. And so when we met our good friends in Crystal City, and Tootie said you have to meet Diana Palacios, people connect with one another in Crystal City in just really amazing ways. And so Diana didn't share this, but when she bought this building, she had this inspiration, and part of it was to honor her father, who was a World War II veteran and who had returned, from fighting abroad with ideas of citizenship and responsibility to uplift people. And he had the audacity to file as a Mexican American to run for public office in Crystal City. And this city, 85% Mexican American, Hispanic, was run by 15% of the population. And the minority that ruled the city had all kinds of rules and practices and things to keep the Hispanic community down. So her father, who had the audacity to file and run, was confronted by a member of the Texas Rangers. And that Texas Ranger beat her father to try to get him to take his name off the ballot. And the Texas Rangers, in most media, the white hats, the good guys, they were not the white hats or the good guys in Crystal City. And in many Mexican American communities, they were the ones that enforced white minority rule. Her father had the courage to run and to show that you can do things to uplift communities. And for the Mexican American community, this was audacious to the white people, but to the Mexican American community is inspiring. And that was part of the history of struggle that led to the Los Cinco, the people the first ones that ran and won, and they were organized by the Teamsters Union. So the power of unions is very important. And then later on, the whole effort to with La Raza Unida, and there's going to be a presentation on that, and I hope you can make that. So the reason why my presentation is about an unsung hero, as we made contact around the museum, we knew that on our previous pilgrimages to Crystal City, that when we went to the pilgrimage, how many of you have been to the other pilgrimages, either the 2019, 2023? Okay, now one of the things that we saw there that just amazed us was that in the rotunda, there was this beautiful display of historic photos of the internment camp. And many of our returning survivors and descendants had never seen these photos before. And we were amazed. And so we saw that in 2019, and then in 2023, we kept wondering who did these photos. And it turns out that there was a Crystal City resident, his name was Hector Estrada, who grew up in Crystal City and who produced all these wonderful exhibits. And so I'm going to do a quick PowerPoint just to explain, because his life and his work kind of explains some of what inspires people to do good things. So as we came to know Hector, he shared with us that he came from a family from Mexico. His mother was Indio, and that he very humble origins, but his father had a bakery, served the neighborhood, and was quite successful in many ways. So they did migrant labor. He's shown here in the cap with his tie. This is Hector's father, and his mother in the next photo, holding his sister, never was literate, and often spoke about her children as hands, my hands, because many people who raised children back then, they saw their children as helping out in the field, and they called them, just hands, just to help out. Hector in 1963 went to high school, and he was a star standout basketball player. And you can see from the photos here, good-looking guy, and the cheerleaders here in the lower corner there. The school had this rule that even though the school was like 85% Mexican American, only one of the 4 cheerleaders could be Mexican American. Now think about that. Why would you have that kind of rule? And people might think, oh, that's silly, that's stupid. It was really a way to oppress people. Mm-hmm. And it was something that Hector back then, when we talked to him, he didn't really have many white friends. He didn't have any white friends. It was a segregated school in many ways. And Hector grew up during a time when there was a lot of discrimination against Mexican Americans. People who were migrant workers would go north to work, and they would see signs like this where they weren't allowed in the establishments. They weren't served in restaurants. So these were some of the attitudes and terrible conditions that people faced. Hector grew up during the time of the escalation of the Vietnam War, and he shared the story that many of the young men in this school, and he was one of them, he said they realized that if they got married, they wouldn't get drafted. So he married his high school sweetheart and graduated and immediately left Crystal City. He wanted opportunities. He ends up in San Jose, California, because his brother called him and said, look, Hector, come out to San Jose. There's good jobs out here, and there's union jobs. And so he gets a job as one of the first Mexican-American workers at the Plumbers Union. And he has a wonderful career working in this industry. Around 2000, after many years, he finds this museum and he wanders into it, and it's the Japanese American Museum in San Jose. Just by chance, he wanders in and sees an exhibit there that talks about the Crystal City internment camp. He was amazed. He grew up in Crystal City. He never knew about this internment camp. In fact, he discovered that the school buildings that he went to
which he called Airport 1 and Airport 2, was actually the German school, the school for the Germans there, and the federal high school that the American students went to. So he never knew this, and he was really shocked, outraged, and angry. And what he did was he spent 10 years researching on his own, and in 2012 he brought back to Crystal City an exhibit, a 1,000 square foot exhibit that he produced, and he paid for, researched, and all of the photos that he brought in 2012 were later on used in our pilgrimages in 2019. Now what happened was, after he did this exhibit, he went back and because of his the work and everything that he had been exposed to, he developed a terrible lung ailment, and so it's a fibrosis. And so what happened is he kind of had to put all the work that he did on the interment to the side, and then he left the exhibit here in Crystal City, and he thought that the exhibit had been lost. And so it so happened that when we made contact with him in 2024, I called him out of the blue, and somebody gave me his phone number, and he said, I had called, and most people who are old just don't answer the phone. I mean, it's a spam call or something. He answers the phone, and he goes, hello, and I said, hello, is this Hector Estrada? And he goes, yes, who is this? And I said, well, my name is Victor Uno. I just want to tell you that we've been seeing your photos, your exhibit, in our pilgrimages, and I wanted to see if I could talk to you and meet you. And it was really quiet. He said, do you mean you've been looking at my photos in Crystal City? And I said, yes, it's in the rotunda, and we've been looking at these exhibits, and we're just amazed. And it got really quiet. And I said, Hector, is everything okay? And I said, can we meet for coffee? And he said, Mr. Uno, we can't meet. My health condition is really poor, and I'm crying right now. And I said, excuse me? He says, I thought my exhibit had been lost, and now you're telling me that I have a legacy. And so what he did it all on his own, and what he did was to try to bring the history of this internment camp to his hometown. And he brought amazing photos, and he even was playful, because this little truck at the bottom, that's not in the original photo. That's a copy of his father's bakery truck that made deliveries to the campsite. So again, our pilgrims, when we visit, we see photos. People point to things that are in these photos, and it brings back memories of their time in the camp and where their family stayed. And so those photos are used in high school projects at the high school to teach now about the history of the camp. And again, in 2024, we had a grand opening, and Hector was honored. He flew down. He's in the wheelchair there. He was honored to be one of the cutters of the ribbon for the grand opening. So again, these are just some photos, and these are all of his photos that we used. He also gave a short talk along with Hiroshi and Kaz about the camp, and that's Ruben Salazar in the blue shirt, a high school teacher who was critical in saving the exhibit for us to have. So Hector says, I've been doing all this over the last 15 years because I felt it was unfair to the people who were incarcerated, and it was unfair that they hid it from the American people to know what they were doing. So that is why I decided that more people should know about it, and I'm going to keep doing this until the whole United States knows about it. This is what motivated him, his own personal experience growing up during a time of change and fighting that change, or fighting for change. And Hector sends his regards to everybody here. So that's the story. So I just want to say thank you. We just are so honored to have people like Hector in our lives.
Thank you, Victor. Yeah, beautiful story. He's an amazing, amazing man. But it's just to show you what one individual can do and what all of you as individuals can do as well. So that was a great model.
May
Thank
I add
you.
something?
Sure, of course.
Is this on? Yeah. I just want to let you know that there were 2 Texas Rangers. My dad always went to the drugstore to buy the newspaper. So this time when he walked out, they were waiting for him. And my older sister was in the car, and my dad went in to buy the paper. When he came out, there were 2 Texas Rangers. They both had guns. My dad didn't have a gun. And one stood by as he watched the other one hit him on the head with the gun. And my sister saw that too. So it's not so much, and Victor's right, they are portrayed as knights in shining armor coming to save. Yeah, they'll save you if you're white. But if you're anything but that, they're going to put you down. Thank you. I just wanted to say that about my father.
Yes.
Oh, by the way, when I bought the building, it didn't occur to me that that's the building he was walking out of when that happened. So then I wondered, is it a good thing that now I own that building? Or is it a bad thing because it's going to remind me of that?
Well, in some ways, it's the circle that we always find in our journey through life, that things do come back in full circle. So in some ways, it's that, I'm sure, and it's a good thing.
It's a good thing.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, so next we have Courtney. We partnered with Densho this past year in the hopes that we can archive memorabilia that all of you have in, your back closet or, underneath your bed. It's all very valuable. So letters that your parents wrote to each other or to grandparents, even if it's in Japanese, we can get it translated. Photographs of them in camp, and Victor has had numerous photographs that we were able to use in the museum exhibit. Every little thing. So I actually dug through my closet and found a slip of paper that was typed by the old typewriter, basically saying that my uncle graduated from middle school at Crystal City Middle School, signed by his Japanese teacher. So, little things like that just brings back memories of, my uncle as a child, and having done that achievement. And that's something my grandfather kept in his little, wallet for years. So it's funny that he would keep that and nothing else. So yeah, all of that is very worthwhile to kind of hunt for. So Courtney's going to talk about Densho, and I've asked Courtney to talk about how did Densho start, and why did Densho start, and what Densho is all about.
Thanks. Should I stand up or?
Yeah, if you.
Okay.
I don't trust myself. It's okay.
Can I borrow that?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Hi everyone, my name is Courtney and I'm really excited to be here representing Densho, and as Diane said, I live in San Antonio, so it's my adopted hometown, so welcome everyone. I hope you're enjoying what is for us cooler weather. So if you are not familiar with Densho, our mission is to preserve and share the history of World War II incarceration of Japanese Americans to promote equity and justice today. So we are most known for being an online archive, but we consider ourselves a public history organization that documents the stories of Japanese Americans who were incarcerated during World War II. So just a little bit of history of Densho, and it really resonates with, I think, this theme that we're talking about of how people shape history. And so Densho was founded 29 years ago in 1996 in Seattle with the purpose of preserving Japanese American World War II incarceration stories. And our co-founders were inspired by Steven Spielberg's Shoah Foundation, which at the time was recording the oral histories and the testimonials of Holocaust survivors. Founder Tommy Keita was a technology person. He worked for Microsoft. And so he was thinking about how, not only could we have these oral histories, but how could we digitize them, right, to preserve them? And it turns out that foresight was really, really great, because now our online digital archive is accessible all over the world, right? And, we speak to students, we speak to independent scholars, we speak to family historians, people who are just interested in this history. And one of the things that they say is that it's so nice we don't have to physically go in, right, to go search your archive. So everything on our archive is on our website and easily accessible. And after we started, recording oral histories, we also recognized that there was a need to have different types of documentation. So as Diane was saying, we actually collect photos, documents, we collect, someone's saying that they have a yearbook, right, that you want to share, letters, drawings, anything that you or your family wants to collect and share, with the general public. You're welcome to bring that to Densho. If you have it here, you're welcome to join us at our scanning table, and that will be entered into our digital archive. We also have other secondary sources that support just general learning about this incarceration, right? And that is called our Densho Encyclopedia. It's kind of like Wikipedia, but it's vetted by historians, it's vetted by our staff, and written by experts. And then post 9/11, right, as I'm sure many of you in this room have thought about, the Japanese American community, especially Densho, was thinking a lot about the overlaps, right? When, kind of like the mayor was talking about this morning, when national security becomes a guise for, dismantling civil liberties. And so in the post 9/11 era, Densho did a lot of speaking up about, right, or speaking up against, the anti-Muslim, anti-Arab sentiment that was popping up as a result of 9/11, but of course had been fomenting for years under the surface. And so a lot of our work is providing that historical basis for organizations so that they can understand, how does the Alien Enemies Act, right? How does that history of World War II incarceration, right, shape the world that we live in today, including the injustices, but also, right, the ways that different communities fought against that. And today we are a nationally recognized digital community archive and education hub, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So you are welcome to go to our website. It's densho.org, and I'm just going to run through a few different highlights of our website. So the first is the Densho Digital Repository, which is our archive. So that's where you'll find our oral histories, photos, documents. We have newspapers. We have lots of different primary sources relating to the incarceration, but also, right, pre-war. We have pre-war documents, and we also have things like information on resettlement as well. Like I said, we have the encyclopedia, which has articles on people, places, and events and themes. We have a Catalyst blog, which are more kind of like articles, but we also have guest writers that might share, a little bit more history in depth. We might talk about opinions, right? We have folks that are, talking about, for example, when the Alien Enemies Act started coming into the news, right? Guest writers were talking about the connection between the incarceration and the Alien Enemies Act during World War II and today, and why it's so important to stand against that. We also have this really cool interactive map called Sites of Shame, and it maps all these different, confinement sites across the country, but it's interactive, right? So you can trace, for example, a family's history and see how that family might have experienced separation, right, or reunion together as part of that. We have teaching resources for educators and for youth as well. And we have a specific Crystal City landing page. So if you want to learn more about our collections around Crystal City, you can go to densho.org/Crystal City. A couple of highlights you'll see. We have a recent history piece from Rob Busher that he wrote about Crystal City that came up a few days ago. And one of our featured collections is actually the Art Shibayama collection. So just wanted to name that. And so I know I've been talking a little bit about Densho, but I want to share what brings me to this work. I am Asian American, but I am not a descendant. But I also think it's really important for me, someone who doesn't identify, right, to really talk about why this history matters. For me, I grew up in Hawaii, and I had a really unique educational background. I got to take Asian American literature. I got to take Asian American history, and that's something that a lot of children of color across this country, right? They don't get to take history classes about their own background. I remember my U.S. history teacher, right, the very first day of class, he says, so history is subjective, and that's how we're going to study it, because we know that history was written by the victors. As early as in fourth grade, I remember my fourth grade teacher saying, "Just so you know, I know it says this in the textbook, but Captain Cook didn't discover Hawaii." And so it's very lucky, right? Because not a lot of students get access to that kind of teaching and that kind of approach. And I didn't realize how lucky I was until I went to a predominantly white institution and learned that was a very different type of history I had learned. But then I got really involved in ethnic studies, which absolutely shapes the way I see the world, but also the way I approach teaching in my classroom. I think it also helped me understand how all of our histories are interconnected, right? And just thinking about what the other panelists were talking about today, and especially I think what we're going to see tomorrow at the My Story Museum, is understanding that both the history of oppression is interrelated, but so is that history of liberation. And so, that brought me again to teaching in the classroom. I most recently taught 6th through 8th grade English as a second language in the San Antonio ISD, so just kind of right down the road. And I taught George Takei's They Called Us Enemy, the graphic novel, because for some of my students, especially as they're learning English, it was a great way to start to introduce them into this period of U.S. history, but also, right, it was accessible, right, because it was a graphic novel. And I'll never forget that if you've seen the cover of that, right, there's it's a picture of George Takei and his family in camp. One of my students, who was actually in an immigrant detention center with her mom, the first thing she looked at and was "This reminds me of that center," right? And before I even started introducing the historical context of this book, my immigrant students, most of them who at some point had been separated from their families in their immigration journey, said, "Oh, I think this book is about immigrants like me," because they saw the barbed wire. And to me, it's these are 11 to 14-year-olds, and why, when they see barbed wire, is the first thing that they're thinking that, oh, this is my story as an immigrant who comes to this country. And it just shouldn't have to be that way. And so I used Densho to give that historical background about Brower and about the World War II incarceration, because it actually uses Japanese American voices. When I think about the way that Japanese American incarceration is taught in classrooms, sometimes it's taught, first of all, sometimes it's not taught at all, right? And second of all, if it is taught, it's taught in a way that, you'll read about Executive Order 9066, but you'll never hear the perspective of someone who's Japanese American and experienced that incarceration, right? And that was something that I didn't want to be true in my classroom. And so that is, very much, those experiences very much shaped my personal values and why I continue to do work like this, and why I found myself at a place like Densho, where my job in particular is working with teachers to help them understand how to teach this in an effective, inclusive way that, again, centers the perspectives of those who are actually impacted by this event, rather than focusing on just, the perspective of those in power. And so we've been talking a lot about the role of people in shaping history, and I think that is absolutely true for the way that Densho approaches our work. So we have, like I mentioned earlier, the Densho Digital Repository, and we are really unique in our archival approach because we have what's called a post-custodial approach. So it's our archivists call it a catch and release. So if you want to share something from your family's collection, you actually don't have to give it to us, which I think is really, really nice. You get to keep it. You just loan it for us so that we can scan it and digitize it. And then, let's say there's a family letter where two of your family members are fighting and you don't want the general public to know about that, we can redact that out. Or if you change your mind years later and you say, hey, I actually don't want this letter to be online, it can be taken down. And so I think that's really important because how many of us were taught history from the perspective of those who experienced it, right? I would say, right, not many of us. And how many of us actually really get to think about how our community's voices shape our histories. And that's, for me, what I find really powerful about the way Densho approaches their work is that our archivists have this really incredible, deep connection to the families that they're working with. We also have the encyclopedia and the catalyst blog, like I mentioned. These don't just come from Densho staff members, they also come from community members who are sharing their perspectives. For me, as an educator, I love working with teachers, and a lot of what I do is ask them, how can I help you teach this in the classroom? And what lessons can I take that so I can teach other teachers how to effectively teach this? And then finally, right, thinking about this idea of justice and solidarity, I know that's been coming up a lot today. We talk a lot about how, JA incarceration can really help other people understand, the lessons of resistance, right? I think that redress is really under-taught, especially in K through 12 schools, but that can provide a way for students to understand how they can be activists in different ways, how they can fight for not just their own community, but also for others as well. And so, as you all know, we're all facing major challenges. I know this morning we talked a lot about historical revisionism, so I won't touch too much on that. But PEN America just came out with a list of banned books across the country, and there are Japanese American incarceration stories that are banned from being taught in certain school districts around the country. And then here, like in a place like Texas, we are required to teach, right, all both sides of a story, right? And my question is, what are the both sides of Japanese American incarceration, right? What are the both sides of slavery? What are the both sides of the Holocaust, right? That is actually really inappropriate to teach, and it's just wrong, right? And it's not an actual accurate portrayal of history, and we shouldn't be making these positions seem like they're both equal, right? Because they're not. We also are seeing the rise of artificial intelligence, so some of you might Google something and that automatic descriptor pops up, because I have a 5-month-old, so sometimes I'm like, she's teething, what do I do? And it has that automatic description. But we've seen a lot of misinformation or decontextualized information come out of that. So one of our archivists was trying to look up information about a train ride, and the AI pulled up a summary that said that the train ride to Gila River was pleasant. Which is really problematic. But what happened was that it pulled from a primary source of a young girl who said that it was pleasant compared to the bus ride. Right? So it's a very different context, but imagine if you're someone who doesn't know that, and that's the history you're looking up, and that's the history you take and share with other people, right? It's incomplete. I won't talk about some of the other things that I know other folks have talked about, but also we really want to talk about those hidden histories. Like, we know, for example, we don't have as many stories or documents or histories about Crystal City, for example, in our archive. And so in 5 years, what we're hoping to do is build a public index of Japanese American collections so that smaller collections have more resilience, right, are connected to this larger picture. So if one of them gets threatened, right, we know how to support, we know that we can pull some of that information. We want to launch more resources for students and educators as they're teaching and learning this history. And of course, we want to expand our digital repository in order to help insulate it against, right, like the historical revisions that is happening across the country, and that erasure of various histories, including Japanese American incarceration.
Wow. I am so hopeful hearing you talk about Densho and how you came to this work, because I think that our generation is getting a lot older and it's getting a lot harder for us to kind of continue at this pace. So I'm really inspired by your story, and I'm hoping that this next generation will take it up as well. So thank you, Courtney. All right, so we just wanted to ask a few questions to our panelists, and then we'd like to open it up to questions from our audience. So one of the thoughts was that, as we said, it's really important for us to partner together and also to partner across borders, across communities, across ethnicities. And I think, Diana, if you could talk about, your partnership with your internal community, but also with the external community in helping to develop the My Story Museum.
As I had mentioned, I started out thinking that I could do it and keep it going on my own, but that was crazy. And I am amazed at how God brings the right people together at the right time to accomplish what He wants to accomplish. In this case, all of the people that came to help that I mentioned already, and I know that all of you are also going to be a part of it. And I hope that when you go there tomorrow, that you'll find something there that will help you know personally, this is my museum, that each one of you would find something in there about you. And we also had, of course, the city assisting in, they were just available for whatever we needed. And they still are. They're very, very supportive of the museum. So recently, actually just like last week, I opened a gift shop there because I own a bail bonding company, which is what helped me fund this. But I'm basically working at that to support the museum. So I thought, well, I'm gonna start a gift shop and hopefully that will help me keep it going. And I know that the city is available because they've already expressed to me that I think they have applied for funds and are waiting on, are you all waiting on the response to that? The application for the museum? Mr. Mayor and City Council ladies?
Well, that was something that I think
Yeah, it is. It's a progress that we're still looking into because definitely, how you said, this isn't just something that we want now. It's continuous. We definitely need this. I speak pretty loud.
Hello, Andrea Marquez, Mayor Pro Tem. So there was some funds available or that was brought to our attention for a museum. And since there's something already in hand and everybody's put a lot of work into it, we definitely wanted to continue to grow and to be there for many years. So as a council, we are looking to definitely support in any way. We want the beautification, the process, the growth of it, because this is history that people need to know, and not just now, but forever. So we definitely are here to help you out.
Thank you.
And then one of the things also that we're going to end up possibly doing is, like we had mentioned or spoken about, is to possibly assist also the museum in regards to the outside facades and the mural that we've been wanting to incorporate with you with the help of the either hotel motel tax or some type of EDC funding that we can allocate for the museum itself. So we can bring in business and hotel tax and tourism and grow from there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yay. So all the nights we spent, it's going to pay off. It goes to that. That's great. Thank you.
And also, people from the community just on a regular basis come in. Oh, look, my grandfather had this, my mother has this. And it's kind of difficult to try to display everything that everybody's bringing in. But it has a second story, so we might go there. A second floor.
So really, sorry. I have to say that Deanna has made it very welcoming. It's like her home. And every time we walk in the door, she's there to greet us, and it just feels like family. So we are very, very, grateful. So Victor, the same question, the role of community or individuals in developing the My Story Museum, the internment camp portion.
Oh, thank you for the question. But before I do that, we were a bit remiss. Mayor Jody Serta, can you please stand up and let's give him a warm welcome. He's the mayor of Crystal City. And also we want to welcome Councilmember Cecilia Ross. Please stand up. And Vice Mayor Andeline Marquez. So we get to journey to Crystal City tomorrow. It's going to be quite an extraordinary experience and a very warm welcome. We also have a school board member here, Mike Tocayo, Victor Bonilla. And there's so many people. Is Tootie here? Tootie here in the back. And from San Antonio, Manuel Garza here from the Southwest Voter. And someone... Severita Lara. Oh, wonderful. And there's going to be a wonderful presentation in the next session. Is it going to be in the same room here? In A? Yes. So please, to learn about the history of Crystal City in a more intimate way, directly from the participants who made history, please stick around. The way that museums, how many people here go to museums or like to go? And really, it's quite an extraordinary experience. And I think I like to go to museums, and I'm always moved by stories, and that's why the My Story Museum resonates so much with me. And I think most people connect with museums where they see themselves in that museum or somehow in the story. And I want to just say that as we worked around this exhibit for the internment camp, we made many connections. And so I have this one connection, which is that my father, he was a graduate of the internment camp's high school, Federal High. It was a high school for American students. So it was actually the only integrated school that I know of all the internment camps, because it had German Americans also. So if you were an American student, then you went to the Federal High. And so that is really interesting, and I wonder what kind of conversations they had as they taught this American high school students behind barbed wire. So when I mentioned this to Diana, that after he graduated, he enlisted in the Navy, she said, well, I need your father's photo for the Veterans Wall. There's a wonderful wall there with pictures of veterans from Crystal City from World War II, Korea, Vietnam. And the local park is named after one of the first casualties of the Vietnam War. And Mexican Americans were enlisting and dying at higher rates than all other demographic groups in Vietnam. So when she told me this, I said, okay, great, thank you. And so I gave her a photo of my father, Robert Uno. He joined the Navy, and so he had the rank and everything. And so what she did was she sent all the photos across the border to get framed and printed, and then the original photos would be returned. So what happened was when all these photos are getting put on the wall, almost all of the people who are up there have names like Alberto, Alejandro, and Spanish names. And so I get to my father's name, and my father's name is Robert Uno. And so when I look at it, I said, oh, his name's been corrected. It's Roberto Uno. And we were so, I shared it with my siblings, and we were so kind of overjoyed because we'd been adopted into the community of Crystal City. And it's also a funny turn on how, I was talking to somebody there whose his name was Fred. But he's Spanish, and he said, that's always bothered me that when I came here, they changed my name to Fred. It's Fernando. But it's funny how people's names get changed, but in this case here, we just loved it. So these kinds of stories and experiences in Crystal City are very special to us. And I just want to say that as we do museum work and try to preserve stories, people have your stories and really should write down, share among your siblings all the things that you need to pass on to your children, grandchildren, and preserve that history. It's very important.
Thank you, Victor. All right, so then just another question, our ending question, before we open it up to audience. I think it's really important to know that all of this is, kind of our grunt work. We put all our, past lives together and try to, bring all the resources that we have built over the years for this museum project. And we've just been very fortunate that we have some great people, because I've heard stories of folks working by committee and committees imploding because people disagree or they insist it has to be their way or whatever. But there's something about our group that, first of all, I think we trust each other. We really respect each other, and I think there is a bottom line love for each other and all that folks have gone through to do this work. So we're very, very lucky. But I think in our current period where we're all facing challenges, at the personal level, at the professional level, I wanted our panelists to talk about their challenges as they see them. So what are you faced with in the next few years? And then also, what is your vision for the museum, for Densho's partnership with the museum in the next 5 years?
The biggest challenge is financial, because I've already invested everything I had, sold the house and everything. So now I have the gift shop. But that's my biggest challenge. As far as support from the community, it's there. Support from all of you, it's been there. It's amazing. And I hope, and I'm planning so that when I'm not here, that museum will still go on. That history will, I don't want it like somebody trying to blot it out. I want it to go on and on because it's a real story. I'll share with you a little bit about challenges. When I was in school, we were not allowed to speak Spanish in school, and most of the time we spoke Spanish at home. Well, we didn't speak English. My mom and my dad spoke English, but at home we spoke Spanish. So at school, they would not allow us to speak Spanish, and we would get paddled if they heard you speaking in Spanish. And a few years ago, I was coming to speak. Severita and I were going to be at UTSA, and it reminded me because my youngest sister got paddled in high school for laughing. No, she was in junior high. She got paddled for laughing in Spanish. And I could never figure out how you do that. So when I was driving to San Antonio, it was around Christmas time, I saw a big billboard that had Santa Claus. And it said, ho, 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 ha, ha, ha. And I thought, well, maybe that's how you laugh in Spanish. And then in talking to some students about it, I said, I can't figure out, and I told him, I said, I can't figure out how you laugh in Spanish. And he said, well, did she throw a grito? But challenges, it's a part of life. and whatever we're going through. I have a friend of mine that she's always drama and always, she's about to die today, every day. And so I tell her, be patient. Don't worry about this problem. In 6 months, you're not going to remember it. You're going to have another one. So that's life. But I'm sure we can handle whatever challenge comes.
That's great. I love that
Working together.
Okay, and Courtney? Yeah, I'll speak more from my perspective as a former teacher. So just a little bit of background. I was still in the classroom when some of the anti-CRT, the anti-critical race theory stuff started popping up in Texas. And, you know, my students had produced some really incredible opinion pieces about basically about their experiences as immigrants, right? So some of them said that if you are undocumented, you should still be able to receive access to the COVID vaccine, because I was teaching in 2020 to 2021. I was, you know, hearing from one of my students that, you know, I was in a detention center. It was one of the worst and most dehumanizing experiences of my life. And I think we should close detention centers, right? And these are their opinions based off of their personal experiences. And the district, you know, took down their work from their website because it violated some of their policies. And again, this was during that time, which is still going on, right, of censorship around quote unquote difficult topics. And to me, I think what's really hard is that, like, these are my students' experiences, right? And technically I'm supposed to expose them to multiple sides, but why would I expose my student who is in a detention center to a side that says that she should be in detention centers, right? That is exposing my students to racism and bringing that into that classroom. And that's actually that's not what I'm supposed to do, right? My classroom is supposed to be this safe container for students to be themselves and to share their stories and to feel like they are fully welcome to be who they are, right? And so, you know, I think that is such a micro example of what's happening in classrooms around the country. But, you know, it is not just stories of Japanese American incarcerations, it's any story of racism, right, that is being taken down and considered inappropriate. It is understanding that difference, right, is okay, that is being censored and taken down, right? And when we think about what that means for this upcoming generation, they don't have access to understanding the true history of our country. How can they ever change it, right? We can only tackle problems if we understand the root cause of the solution, right? And our solutions have to match the scope of our problems. But if you don't ever talk about racism, right, as a student, and you don't understand that racism is the root of so many problems that we have today, then how will you ever be equipped to solve that as a young person in this country? And so for me, I think that is a huge challenge that a lot of teachers are facing. And, you know, I get it, right? As a teacher, I was scared, right? I'm like, this is my job. And what happens if I speak out? Because then I lose my security, you know, my financial security for my family. So it's a very real and understandable fear. But it also has this huge chilling effect across the country. And again, like, as we've heard today over and over and over again, right? Understanding these stories are so vital, not just for us, but also for the next generation. My students, and I would say young people, are really hungry to learn these stories. They don't want, you know, their books to be thrown out. They don't want their stories to be censored. And so for me, you know, thinking about our work at Densho and also what all of us can do here, it's like, how do we support young people? How do we support teachers to make sure that these histories are told? That's why it's so important to have spaces like museums that are outside of schools, right? So that students can continue to learn about these histories. That's why it's so important to have access to digital archives, right? So that, you know, even outside of school, if they're not getting access to that information, that it still exists.
Is this working? Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges, well, first of all, it's wonderful that we have a museum that is run by somebody like Diana, who has vision and purpose. But one of the biggest challenges we face is that we're all aging out, and the stories really of people and voices we're beginning to lose. We have been losing them. One of our good friends, Libya Yamamoto, she's passed on, but she left a memoir, and so I hope people buy the book. It's in next room over here. And when I first met her, she shared with me, because she was Peruvian Japanese, when she found out that my name was Uno, she said, "Is your name? Do you know George Uno Kumemaru?" And I said, "Oh, that's my grandfather." And she said, "Oh, your grandfather, Sensei Uno, he was the one that taught us English." And so when she said Sensei Uno, we knew our grandfather's just granddad. We didn't know he was a sensei. But then this affection that she had as she shared the story about how he taught them songs and culture, things about America, she began to weep because she had so many memories of him teaching them, and she would say, your grandfather even taught us love songs. And I said, "Oh no, not my grandfather. That sounds kind of." But then we said, "Oh yeah, well, you had 10 kids, so kind of makes sense." But we have these stories in the families that if we don't hear them, and then if we don't share them, and I think it's so important that these kinds of stories are shared. And one of the things that Hector shared with us, or with me, the stories about the paddling, he said that it was vicious. He said he remembered back when he went to school that girls would wear skirts, and that because of the skirts, there was nothing to protect the legs. And that he said one of his classmates was taken out and beat on the legs, so she came back with bruises. And as he told me this, he wept. He said it was so mean, and he couldn't understand, why this was being done. And those are stories that come from people who experienced it, and it's not to. It's a real history that those stories have to be told and remembered, because things change and have to change, and without those stories, it's so academic, So I think the challenge is, please get out there and tell your stories, share your stories. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we have a few minutes for questions from the audience. If anybody has a question or something to share. Yes, microphone, traveling microphone. Okay, thank you.
Where is it?
Okay.
Hi, this is my first pilgrimage, and I'm just very impressed and appreciate the support from the Crystal City, the people of the town, the leaders, and also Diana. So I have a question. So I'm married to a woman whose family is from New Mexico and Mexico, and her father was in the Navy, fought Japanese in the Pacific. We have other family members, extended family, who is on Guadalcanal. Anyway, fought the Japanese. And so my grandfather was in Lordsburg, Santa Fe, Tuna Canyon, anyway, Santa Fe a couple times, and then Crystal City with the family. So in going to New Mexico with my wife, we visited Santa Fe, and I don't know if people know, so there's a big controversy about having a memorial for the Japanese Americans. And is because, throughout history, as I learned, there's many Latino Americans that fought in various wars, Civil War through, Vietnam and on, including World War II. And I think many of the people, including the Latinos in the Southwest, end up going to the Pacific War. And so there's, I guess, hundreds of Latinos in the North or New Mexico area that were in the Army before the war started and were in the Bataan Death March. And so that town and that area and the veterans were very opposed to any monument to the Japanese Americans being incarcerated there. And so it's in a dog park and a big boulder with one plaque. And when I went there, I didn't know this. And so later I looked up online and I found about this controversy. So I wonder if, so I really appreciate what you folks have done and supported. Was there any opposition
Good question.
from the veterans who may have either families who were fought in the Pacific against the Japanese or anything like that?
Good question.
No opposition. In fact, the museum has 3 exhibits. One is the internment camp. The other one is Raza Unida and the walkout of 1969. But we have a big wall dedicated to all the veterans that have served in all wars that have come out of Zavala County. And they were there for the opening, and they've been very supportive, and they found as many as they could to send them over to the museum. So there's been no opposition from them.
Thank you. Thank you. Another question? Last question? Yes?
Hi, my question is for Densho, Courtney. What types of materials does Densho not accept? I understand it is mostly for families and information about those incarcerees, but how about others who are maybe related to incarcerees or affected by the incarceration, but were not incarcerated themselves?
Yeah, I believe we do capture that as well. We also capture pre-war, documents, letters, photographs, any materials, and then even post-war relating to, for example, resettlement. I know that we have talked about trying to capture more of the contemporary moment, right? For example, we have some oral histories where people talk about why, they fought for redress and why they fight with the Black community for reparations, for enslavement, for example. But it tends to really focus on the full story. And so I think that just happens to be part of it rather than kind of that modern day being just the focus. I will defer to Caitlin, who is where registration was. Sorry, I'm pointing that way, but it's outside. But Caitlin is our archives director, and she can be more specific about what we take and what we don't take. Because I know sometimes there are also just bigger items that, if they don't photograph well, for example, we can't take it, and maybe that might be better if you want to share it, like placed at a museum, for example. And so she would be able to better answer that. And she's doing community scanning. So if folks have, anything that they want scanned related to Crystal City, related to the incarceration, even if it's not a Crystal City, even like you said, it could be correspondence, right? That still helps us understand this full history more. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
All right. I think with that, we've concluded our panel. Before we close, I just want to announce that the Historia de Cristal panel will be next door. And then Rising Together, Building Our Movements for Justice and Reparations will be in this room starting at 3:30. So with that, I would like to thank our panelists. Amazing stories. I would also like to thank our audience, because I think that we are now taking away, kind of moments that we will remember, and then hopefully inspiration to share your story. Thank you.